Good evening. You're watching ThinkTech Asia and our program this evening, Security for International Sporting Events. And our special guest is the former Hawaii FBI Special Agent in Charge, Mr. Charles Goodwin, otherwise known to me, and I'm going to call you if it's all right, Charlie.
Oh, sure, that's fine. Thanks, David. Great to be here with you.
And ladies and gentlemen, Charlie is also a consultant for international sporting events in that field and knows a great deal about it. And just to kind of bring you back a little bit, we are approaching right about the 1-year anniversary of the Boston bombing, right, Charlie?
Right, April 15th.
And just to kind of review just a little bit, we've got a little video clip here we want to show you from that event. And control room, go ahead and show that video. You'll probably remember this terrible event that occurred just about a year ago. And Charlie, we wanted to show this to our audience just to kind of, not to bring back the bad memories, but to kind of set the stage for what we're going to talk about in this program about the whole problem of how do you secure an international sporting event where you've got all these people, and to kind of set the stage for that. What are we talking about in terms of annual profits or income, the financial side of this whole industry?
Well, I mean, it's huge. Just to give you an example, Super Bowl last year generated something in the neighborhood of $480 million for the city of New Orleans and almost $2 billion in advertising alone. So
$2 billion
in advertising.
One event.
Yeah. And of course, the Super Bowl is one of those events that's probably one of the most recognizable. Huge crowds, big impact on the city, selling out hotels and that sort of thing. But you have to keep in mind sporting events of all types. And you look, for instance, at the Olympics, they may have 150 different venues for that event. Some of them are indoors, some of them are outdoors. And that's one of the key features, if you will, of the problems facing those that are providing security to these events is they're all different. Some are outdoors and are wide open, and others are relatively well contained, for instance, in a stadium or an arena of some sort.
And this type of worldwide draw that these events have, because you have a concentration of people. And control room, let's show the audience photograph number 3 if we could. Because you have a concentration of people, it makes it a prime target, does it not, for terrorism or some guy who's just gone off the rails and wants to do some damage.
Yeah, exactly.
The recent Olympics in Sochi, the lead up to it, if you recall, there was a lot of fear and concern about,
and justifiably so,
terrorism.
I mean, right next door you have the Chechens, and you had a bombing there in the train station, not too many, 6 or 8 weeks before the Olympics leading up. So obviously there was a lot of concern there on the part of all the participants as to the level of security and whether or not they could, and to their credit, they did prevent any act of terrorism.
Well, I noticed
they probably don't go about it.
I noticed a flicker of a smile when you say to their credit.
I mean, they don't much bother themselves with civil rights and concerns about people's constitutional rights and things like that. So they operate in a different environment there.
Well, we don't know what Putin and the security forces did to really ensure safety at Sochi, but we have had some some examples of how the Russians deal with terrorists before, and it's slightly different than the way that we handle them here.
They are really not interested in arresting anybody. They're there to deter and prevent and eliminate security threats. And one of the good examples, I think, is in fact, you can look at it on YouTube. Some Russian commandos intercepted a group of pirates off the coast of Somalia.
Right, I remember that. Okay.
You remember seeing that? And the way they dealt with it, once they had them essentially in custody and interrogated them.
Well, the commandos chased them back to the
mothership, which was a ship of about, it looked to be at least 150 feet long. And then from that ship, they would launch smaller boats, which, if you saw Captain Phillips, that's the kind of tactics they used to board a bigger ship and take control of it and potentially hold it hostage for a ransom, that sort of thing. But once they had interrogated them and dealt with the situation at hand, they basically handcuffed them to the boat and sunk it, blew it up, sunk it. So there were no trials or any problems like that. There were no civil rights involved, and there was no arrests.
Well, when you're working security, you know, at a U.S. event, you've got the whole issue of civil liberties and constitutional rights that have to be handled. But you know, these major sporting events, don't they provide a fabulous forum for somebody who wants to cause some damage to create a worldwide attention to some kind of cause or whatever?
Exactly, and they do, and that is why you see at events, all sorts of events, major security concerns. If you look at I think this year at Boston, you'll see some significant enhancements to security. Certainly at Super Bowl, these other big NFL, NBA, NASCAR, there's security at all these events. And what I have to stress is that the venues are all different, so the security concerns and problems are all different as well.
Well, let's take a look at photograph number 6 here, if we could. And you know, this Charlie, is a full soccer or event stadium full of people. And what are some of the concerns that you have to do in a stadium situation when you think about it?
Well, in order to provide security in an event like that, first of all, the event itself is fairly closed. It's as you see, it's in a soccer stadium, as it would be in a football stadium or something like that. So security people there are able to a degree, control who comes in and what they bring in with them.
And how do they do this? Well,
it may be a number of factors. They may use magnetometers. They may do hand searches. They may use wanding to check for weapons and that sort of thing. But by and large, it's just like going through the airport. You're going to be screened going in. Now you can't guard against every single eventuality.
But
I mean, we don't. You know, they probably don't have, for instance, explosive detection devices and things like that at most of these events. Some they do.
But in the old days, you remember when you went to a football game, you could take a cooler.
Exactly. You could bring your cooler in. You could bring your beer in. It was a great family day, that sort of thing.
But those days are gone.
Those days are pretty much gone. Today we live in a different world. Pretty much all changed beginning with 9/11. And since then, just like the Boston bombing, all these other events, and it doesn't have to be international terrorism either. If you look at the schools, you look at churches, synagogues, other sporting events, movie theaters, and that sort of thing, they all face the same type of security issues. It's places where there are people, you know, a fairly good-sized number of people gather, provides, as you pointed out, an opportunity for bad conduct.
Right. So let's go back to this photograph number 6 now, if we could, one more time.
That's a soccer stadium.
So we're at the stadium here, and let's kind of compare and contrast that situation, Charlie, with number 4, photograph number 4 here, which is a different type of security challenge. And
yeah, exactly. That's in case you can't pick out what it is right away, as a golf course. And unlike a stadium or an arena, it is pretty much wide open. So that
But, I mean,
presents
there-
a whole different set of circumstances and security concerns.
But aren't there the crowd control for a golf course coming into a big golfing event? Don't you have that kind of situation?
No, you don't necessarily. Now, some do and some don't. Again, every venue is different, and so you have to tailor your security plan and your response plans to each individual event. And it would be the same. You wouldn't handle security at a NASCAR event like you would at a football event or at a golfing event.
But a NASCAR event, again, is pretty
Again,
much
it's
a
fairly,
closed
it's
situation.
maybe a lot bigger area than a football arena or something like that. But again, you have controlled access at points. And in golf you do too, to a certain extent. But golf courses are pretty much wide open. And so some of them get fenced, some properties get fenced, and others don't. But again, can't guard against every eventuality.
Well, let's, later on in the show here, I want to talk about some of the things that, in terms of protection of the public,
Right.
in a large sporting event, an international type situation. What are the things that kind of keep you awake at night thinking about it? But we'll get to that later,
Yeah,
because
okay.
before we do that, I wanted to kind of get you to start talking a little bit about what are some of the, as you plan security for one of these international events, what are some of the considerations that you have to sit down and start to focus on?
Well, I think by and large in planning the security, the first and most obvious thing is the venue and what kind of venue you're dealing with. And so from there, you want to develop a good security plan that takes into account collaboration with, for instance, state, local, federal, law enforcement, the public safety sector, for various responses, because clearly law enforcement is not the only piece of this. You also have medical, EMT response, fire response. You could have natural disasters, you can have man-made disasters, that sort of thing. So you have to do a comprehensive plan and look at such things as how are you going to move people, what kind of police presence are you going to have, and what kind do you want, things of that nature.
What is in that preparation with the stakeholders, if you will, of a major event? Is there an intelligence communication that takes place between folks like the FBI or law enforcement or CIA over to the event?
Yeah, and again, it depends on the size and the scope of the event. And you can look at the planning, for instance. I keep coming back to Super Bowl because that probably, I think arguably, is the most visible sporting event probably in this country.
Okay.
Now, in Europe, it may be a soccer event, or as they call football there. But you have to look at the overall picture of that, and you have to kind of back up and ask me that question again, because I lost my train of thought.
So here, the question is this, is that in the planning of a major event like Super Bowl,
Right.
do the private sector organizers of that event, are they tapped into various intelligence agencies,
because
law enforcement and all that?
Yeah, as I mentioned, the stakeholders in a situation like that are not only the organizers of the event, but in an event of that magnitude, you're going to have the public sector people. You're going to have the state and local police. You're going to have the FBI. You may have Homeland Security, and you're going to have the intelligence components of all that, along with your hazmat, fire and EMS or EMT.
Okay.
And so all of those, and what you're going to do is you're going to bring all those people together. And for a small event, obviously it's going to be a smaller group of people. But for a group, or for an event like the Super Bowl, it's going to include all of those people at a national level, with representatives from the Bureau, intelligence agencies, trying to develop any threat information that's available out there, and not just mining the information, but actively seeking, proactively looking for intelligence that might indicate a threat against the event.
Interesting cooperation.
Yeah,
Very
I mean, there has to be. And clearly since 9/11, there has been much broader intelligence and information sharing at all of those levels.
We'll come back after the break. You're watching ThinkTech's Asia. We're talking about security for international sporting events with the former special agent in charge of the FBI here in Hawaii, Mr. Charles Goodwin, who is now a international sporting event consultant and an expert. And we'll see you on the other side of the break.
Hello, I'm Jay Fidel of ThinkTech. On March 27th, at the YWCA downtown, Laniakea, we're having a luncheon program, a luncheon panel program we call the Midterm Legislative Report. We're going to present our 2014 Legislative Midterm Update, featuring Bob Toyofuku of Hawaii Advocates as our moderator, and a panel of leading state finance officials who will tell you about what's going on in the legislature about money this session. It's really important. Senator David Ige, chair of the Senate Ways and Means Committee, Representative Aaron Ling Johansson, co-vice chair of the House Finance Committee, Representative Sylvia Luke, chair of the House Finance Committee, Calbert Young, State Budget and Finance Director, all the people who are very important, who know about the state fiscal policy, the state finances this session. You know, they say we have a spare $884 million. How much do we really have? The Council of Revenues changed its mind about projections. And how are we going to spend that money or not? What effect will our, current $40 billion of unfunded liabilities have on all of this? And in an election year, what are the real priorities that are going to determine the money bills and the final result of the 2014 legislature as far as you are concerned? We'll cover current fiscal issues, bills of interest of the business community, and we'll look at the provisions, political dynamics, probabilities, price tags of crossover and passage this year. It'll be very interesting to find out what is going to happen here as far as your bills are concerned and as far as state initiatives are concerned. It's an essential program for anybody who wants to know the fiscal state of the state, or if you want to network with the legislators and like-minded attendees who are likewise interested in the subject. Sign up on thinktechhawaii.com. We look forward to seeing you there. Aloha.
We're back. You're watching ThinkTech's Asia. I'm your host, David Day. I'm here with the former special agent in charge of the FBI, Mr. Charles Goodwin, and a international sporting event security consultant. And we're talking about just how do you plan for security at an international sporting event where you got a lot of people together. And control room, let's go to photograph number 2 if we could here. And ladies and gentlemen, I'll represent to you, this is the iconic photo of the bomb blast during the Boston Marathon, April 15, 2013. And, Charlie, I want to ask you about this particular situation with the Boston Marathon. Is that an example of where the communication between the stakeholders broke down and the Homeland Security wasn't talking to the FBI and they didn't get their signal straight about these two guys, these Chechens? Or what's your take on this?
Well, I don't necessarily think that there was a breakdown in communications per se. There was clearly, my understanding, some information about these two individuals leading up to this. But again, this is a wide open venue.
This is kind of like the golf course.
This is a lot like a golf course, except it's in a much more crowded urban setting. And you've got 26.2 miles of road that you have to secure, essentially. And so you can see that that's almost impossible to obtain. It is impossible to obtain that, to guard against every eventuality in that case.
So are you saying that the Boston Marathon bombing really marks a sea change in foreseeability for security for sporting events?
For years we've been aware of problems in schools and movie theaters and congregations of people, and clearly the people in Boston were, their security was ramped up for this. The cameras, the technology that was deployed, and that sort of thing. And my understanding is this year they're making other changes, for instance, limiting the size or the presence of backpacks and carrying into the area. But again, how do you guard 26 and a half miles or 26.2 miles of road against every? You cannot guard it against every eventuality. So what you have to do is basically, first of all, you have to think about your crowd control. And how are you going to, what kind of police presence are you going to have? Because deterring something like this is probably the best course of action. So again, one of the things they'll do is have a much more robust police presence. There'll probably be checkpoints and things of that nature, particularly in the staging areas, the start and the finish areas where the bombing happened at the finish line. And that's not any mistake that it was done there, because that's where all the attention is focused at the end of the event.
That's where you get the cameras plus the concentration of flesh, right?
Exactly. And the fact is, it probably could have been a lot worse if these guys had used high explosives instead, or had access to high explosives versus black powder, and the type of device they used. The results could have been much worse. So I'm sure that they'll be restricting what is carried into these venues, just like now the NFL, the other stadium events restrict size to a 12 by 12 6 clear package or bag. The business of backpacks and coolers, those days are gone. So which is unfortunate, but it's the world we live in now.
So that the type of terrorism or security event that hit the Boston Marathon, that represents a real change in foreseeability for the future, doesn't it? I mean,
it does.
Before then, you could,
and that's the big question in planning for security of these events, is what is foreseeable. And now clearly this is a new dynamic.
Right.
Just like pre 9/11, nobody envisioned that you would fly, that a group of 19 or 20 people would fly airliners, use them as weapons, and fly them into buildings. But that whole dynamic has changed, and we live a whole different lifestyle now as a result of that.
Right.
Airliners are more secure, and you know what? That may even play into this Malaysian aircraft disappearance, the security
What do you mean by
issues
that?
there. Well, I mean, you can only speculate right now as to what happened, and there are a lot of opinions out there about what happened. But the cockpits are hardened now, and you can't get into them. So I don't know if you've noticed, but on U.S. airliners, when the captain or the first officer leaves the flight deck, one of the flight attendants goes forward and occupies their spot there. I don't know if Malaysia does that or not, but there have been instances. No, there have been instances. You'll follow me here in just a second, where pilots have commandeered the airplane when one or the other left the cockpit. And I'm not saying that that's the instance here, but if one of these pilots jumped the tracks,
mentally jumped
the tracks, or for whatever purpose, the captain or the co-pilot left the cockpit and locked the other one out, he's not going to get back in. And if his purpose was a bad purpose, then whether it was suicide or diverting the airplane for some other purpose, we're not going to know that until. But I'm just saying that things like that, security it's a possibility, and it's a concern. So is it foreseeable? It's happened in the past. And that's why U.S. carriers try to take an extra step precaution, other than just hardening the door and putting barriers in front when that cockpit door is open. They have somebody else go into the cockpit.
So the concept of moving the flight attendant into the empty seat is to...
Well, it's the deterrence.
How does that deter? I don't understand.
Well, at least you have one other person in there.
And what could that flight attendant do? Open the door?
Well, conceivably, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there'd at least be a fight.
Okay. All right. I understand. You know, this is this whole topic of providing security for major international sporting events is one that, you know, is a little bit creepy in the sense that as time goes on, the level of nastiness that or you know, you could say ingenuity, but I want to use the term nastiness that either the terrorist or these folks off the rails employ continues to ratchet up as time goes on.
Well, human ingenuity, as you mentioned, is something that really has no limits. And so then when we talk about, as you mentioned, the foreseeability, you have to start looking to the future and see, well, what is out there that causes problems, and what's in the future for us. And at the Boston Marathon, for instance, as I mentioned, there's going to be different dynamics for the police. They're going to deploy more technology, whether it'll be facial recognition technology or bomb sniffing equipment, whatever it might be. But it's going to have to be in a relatively small area, because you cannot
Do 26 miles.
26 miles.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you've talked about the challenges in the problem of comprehensive planning for events. You know, things like you got to have crowd control. You got to look out.
You even have to provide for such things as natural disasters, and they all kind of, a security plan like that would include crowd control, getting people out of the venue, making sure that the police response that's coming, people can get out and the police can get in. What's the first thing that happens probably in a major event?
Panic.
Panic, but all the police come. The roads are completely clogged. You can't move. So you want to have a plan that you can move people out of the area to relative safety and get them away from the problem and not to the problem. Human nature, again, being, if there's something going on, people want to rubberneck it and they want to see what's going on. And so you've got to have a plan in place to move them to areas of safety.
You know, one of the things you mentioned was the medical emergency situation.
Right.
And I just, for those of you viewers who are here in Hawaii, and I know many of you go to the Punahou Carnival, and it's really interesting to me if you go back behind some of the buildings there, even at Punahou School, you'll see several ambulances and a fire truck and all kinds of vehicles right there within striking distance, ready to go if they should ever need it.
Exactly. That's all part of the planning that goes on behind the scenes. Very often at these events, whether it's golf, whether it's basketball, football, behind the scenes you really don't realize how much planning goes into these events. And for instance, in golf, these tournaments, they plan a year ahead. They're planning a year ahead.
A year ahead. So the Sony Open is being planned now.
Yeah, next year's Sony Open would be being planned now. And not just from a security standpoint, but from the whole operations standpoint.
And is the security situation, in your career since you left the FBI, is it becoming on a year-end to year-end basis more and more complex?
It's dynamic and it's changing every year, and as we foresee problems, then we have to move to address those problems. And frankly, the bombing at Boston, I think, again, raised the awareness of a lot of people as to the problems that are out there. These two individuals were arguably essentially lone actors. They weren't state-sponsored, and they weren't Al-Qaeda-based people. But those are some of the biggest challenges that security faces, are the individuals who act on their own, and their behavior or their actions are not predictable, obviously. Some are. I mean, some give off, in retrospect, a lot of signals that they were planning something, but nobody knew exactly what it was. School shootings, for instance.
Sure. When we come back after the break, Charlie, I want to talk a little bit about the whole notion that you've shared earlier about the concept of intelligence sharing. And ladies and gentlemen, you are watching ThinkTech Asia. I'm your host, David Day. We have with us as our special guest Charles Goodwin, who is the former special agent in charge of the FBI here in Hawaii. And Charlie is now a security expert for international sporting events. And we've got more. We'll see you on the other side of the break.
Castle and Cooke, Hawaii. Investing in Hawaii, creating communities, and providing for the needs of our state. Collateral Analytics, empowering the real estate industry to make better informed property investment decisions. The Foreign Trade Zone, bringing the benefits of the Foreign Trade Zone programs to Hawaii businesses and entrepreneurs. Galen Ho, a senior executive of BAE Systems, a global defense, security, and aerospace company. Hawaiian Electric Company, and its affiliates Maui Electric and Hawaii Electric Light Company on Hawaii Island. The Hawaii Energy Policy Forum, incorporating diverse perspectives to design a flexible and forward-looking energy strategy. Hawaii Energy, the state's energy and efficiency program created to help Hawaii's residents and businesses adopt a clean energy lifestyle. Hawaii Gas, helping Hawaii achieve its transition to clean energy and a better energy future. Hawaii Pacific Health, bringing technology and teamwork together to transform healthcare in Hawaii. The High Tech Development Corporation, attached to DBED, is the state's leading technology agency. The SHIDLER Family Foundation, supporting educational, cultural, and charitable organizations, including ThinkTech.
We're back. You're watching ThinkTech Asia, and our program today is all about providing security for international sporting events. Our special guest is Mr. Charles Goodwin, the former special agent in charge of the FBI here in Hawaii, and Charlie is if you've just joined us, a security expert and consultant for international sporting events now. And Charlie, let's go to this whole concept that you talked about a little bit earlier in the program about the stakeholders having input, and the planning takes place a year in advance for a big sporting event.
Maybe even longer than that, depending on the event.
I picture, all these folks that you've talked about, the law enforcement, the FBI, maybe even the intel types like CIA, all sitting around a table with the head director of security for an event, somebody like you, and they're all around a table and going through these various challenges and problems. What kind of input? Is that actually what happens?
Yeah, pretty much. Typically what I will do for an event is I will, depending on the event and how big it is, I'll make an advance visit to the trip, to the site.
Okay.
And in doing that, we'll look at all the security concerns and the other public safety concerns, and we will bring the people together. And typically it's going to be the local police department, maybe state police. It'll be the FBI, members of a joint terrorism task force if it's a big enough event, people from fire, EMS, and if it involves the military at all, we may even include somebody like that. But we also include, for instance, paid security. Most all of these events will have a component of paid security that'll be there, and maybe even volunteer security that'll be on site. So what we try to do is well in advance, and again, depending on the size of the event, how far in advance and how much effort goes in, we will bring all these people together, sit them down, and we will review the security plan for the event, and we will formulate new components of it, if you will, looking at what's happened, what's foreseeable, and what the concerns are. And from that, we will deploy, police, paid security, and try to direct as best we can protection and security for the event.
Well, let's take an example, just so that the audience has some feel for this. For the Super Bowl, what's the size of the security team if you include the public sector employees pulled in as a part of the team? What have you got for a Super Bowl there? Is it hundreds of people?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I was going to say, for an event like the Super Bowl, they'll know where the event is going to be held years in advance. I don't know exactly how many years, but probably 3 to 5 years in advance. It's not like after last year's Super Bowl, they all of a sudden decide where the next one's going to be. It's well planned in advance. So that intelligence and information sharing component may start years in advance in that case. And with the number of people that are going to be required, and I wouldn't want to even hesitate, make a guess as to how many people are involved at a Super Bowl, but it's safe to say it'd be in the thousands.
Well, when we have a major golf tournament, as an example, here in Hawaii, big one like the Sony Open, what do we have in terms of security?
I would
Is it a lot of people?
Can't really speak to that.
Okay.
Let me say this, that all of those events, for instance, are different. And I used Phoenix Open as an event early on that becomes the 6th largest city in Arizona.
The event.
On Saturday of the event, with nearly 200,000 people there. So it, for the city of Scottsdale and Phoenix,
Okay.
it becomes a huge public safety event. And so there are a lot of resources devoted to something like that versus some smaller events where you may have, instead of 186,000 people, you may only have 2,000 or 3,000 people. So it's altogether different.
So you've got a situation where you've got a visible security team, both private and public sector, like police.
Yeah, police.
And then you got when you got some plainclothes people, I'm sure, as well.
Yeah.
And so
That would be true, for instance, in the again, I keep coming back to the Super Bowl because it is such a high level event. And the for instance, the NFL, they would have their own. They have a security team as well, and they would be part of the planning and part of the meeting group.
now, is there any kind of a backup security force that's out of the way that you don't see?
Well,
in
you
these
know,
events?
just a moment ago I mentioned the concern of getting public safety into an event. And if crowd control is one of the first issues, and next is being able to get resources in. You mentioned that you've seen behind the scenes on a number of occasions, the ambulances and
Sure.
the people behind the scenes. But for an event like that, it's going to be a huge contingent of public safety people behind the scenes, not even on the front row, but in reserve, for instance. And they're going to have to be mobile, they're going to have to be able to move in quickly and take control of the situation. So there's basically a, how do I want to describe it, an escalating response. First, maybe just depending on what has happened. I mean, clearly if it's a big event, you're going to move all your resources right away. But if it's something small that starts as a disturbance, and you've seen this in soccer games, for instance.
Right, they have a little fight breaks out.
You have a little fight breaks out.
That's normal.
So the first thing is you want to have your paid security responds to it, and they address the problem. If it starts to grow, now you have the police involved. And when it turns into a full-scale riot, then you have the riot police, and you want them close by so that they can make a speedy response. And that's basically planning that would go into pretty much any major sporting event.
Let me raise a topic with you, which I want you to think about over the break, and then we'll go to a break and then address the topic. But you know, to kind of come down the home stretch with this show, Charlie, I'd like you to talk to me a little bit about what are the kinds of security concerns that keep you awake at night. You know, what are the things that scare the living daylights out of you and that you worry about, that may be impossible to address, you know, the unknown, if you will, or at least things that haven't happened yet. And ladies and gentlemen, you're watching ThinkTech Asia. I'm your host, David Day, and we are talking about security for international sporting events with our special guest, Mr. Charles Goodwin. And we'll be back after the break.
Hi, Dale. That's Sharon Moriwaki of the Hawaii Energy Policy Forum. And every Wednesday we have Hawaii, the State of Clean Energy. We've been doing it for some time now, and we have some fantastic guests on there, unbelievable guests who give us insight into what is going on in a very complex, sometimes very confusing, sometimes very disappointing area of progress in the state. So we love doing this. We love meeting them. We love talking to them. We love having their ideas out on the table. So maybe, just maybe, we can all make some sense of what's going on. Sharon, what do you think?
I think that's absolutely correct. We enjoy ourselves meeting with all these people and hearing about the energy and the state of clean energy, and hopefully we advance clean energy for the state. So it's terrific. Join us.
Okay, it's every Wednesday. Okay, Wednesday is Energy Day. Every Wednesday, 4 to 5 p.m. Hawaii, the State of Clean Energy, here on ThinkTech Hawaii. We'll see you there.
We're back. Our program, Security for International Sporting Events. Our special guest, Mr. Charles Goodwin, the former special agent in charge of the FBI here in Hawaii and a sporting events security consultant. and you're watching ThinkTech's Asia. Before I forget it, always remember that here on ThinkTech that we do 4 to 5 programs every day right here on this spot, and you can also pick up programs that you've missed on our website at thinktechhawaii.com. We are coming at you live right now from Pioneer Plaza right here in the heart of downtown Honolulu. And if you just joined the program, right at the break I was asking Mr. Goodwin here, what are the things that keep you awake at night that you worry about the most when trying to protect the public at these international sporting events?
Well, let me respond to that by saying the first problem, or the first thing that bothers me, is kind of a low-tech approach, and that is, as we've seen in so many venues, schools, churches, is the active shooter, the individual, if you will, that comes into an event or a venue with a weapon and just starts indiscriminately shooting people, whatever their motive might be. So that's kind of the low tech, and that is probably, in most any event, the sort of thing that you would think to encounter or foresee encountering in most any situation.
Now, but for the Boston Marathon in the United States,
Right.
we haven't seen, as if I recall correctly, the lone shooter carrying not a firearm but hand grenade or some kind of explosive or a suicide bomber.
Well,
we
you
haven't
see-
seen that in
no,
the
we have not, and we're very fortunate in that respect. But you see, just this past week, Al Qaeda has called for car bombs in the United States. They've made a call recently for the use of car bombs here in the
So
U.S.
sadly, that could change.
It could change, and it's foreseeable. Something like that is foreseeable. And we've had bombings. We've had the Atlanta Olympic bombing. We've had the Boston Marathon bombing. There have been other lesser bombings, pipe bombs, and that sort of thing. But fortunately, we have not, with the exception of the World Trade Center bombings prior to 9/11, we have not seen major terrorist or state-sponsored actors in any of these events.
Okay.
So the second part, I guess, of my answer to your question is emerging.
So the question is, what keeps you awake at night?
And that is what is emerging out there is new technology that people could take advantage of. And the one thing that comes to my mind right away is drones and the use of drones.
Hold on one second here.
Okay.
Let's control room. Let's go back to photograph number 6 for our audience here, if we could. Here we go. We're at the stadium. What is it about the drones that bother you, Charlie? You got Amazon going to deliver, going to bomb these folks with their orders?
Just recently, you've seen that Amazon has proposed that they would deliver packages, and maybe you can help me out here, but I think it was 20 or 25 pound packages up to a distance of 20 or 25 miles, right?
Something like that.
And they
right.
would be computer directed using GPS technology and that sort of thing.
Okay.
I have personally seen drones like this. In fact, I have a friend that is a bit of a
you got a drone nut as a friend?
yeah, I got a drone nut as a friend, and he spent $15,000 on a drone. Now you can buy drones that use a GoPro camera or something of that nature for just $100 or $200 from Amazon.
Sure, and it would fit on this table
And,
right in front of us.
Oh,
right?
absolutely. And they're perfect for taking pictures, doing real estate work, and things of that nature. But the bigger ones clearly could be used in an event or in an arena like that, or just about anywhere, to deliver, an explosive package.
So let's go back, control room to
And I'm sorry to interrupt, but what worries me is that something like that, I think, is foreseeable in this day and age. The U.S. military has been using drones in Afghanistan and Pakistan, so people over there are no stranger to drones. Now, clearly, those drones are much, much more sophisticated than what we're talking about Amazon using, for instance. But the technology is available and it's there, and that's the sort of thing that really concerns me.
Well, let's go back to this photograph, Charlie, photograph number 6, if we could. Again, we're at the stadium, ladies and gentlemen, and so picture, if you will, a drone owner that doesn't have to be in the stadium. He can be
Arguably, he could be miles away.
miles away.
And he could be controlling it by use of a computer, using GPS, satellite, or ground-based technology.
And you know, even if you take the weight limit that Amazon is talking about, 25 pounds, you go down to 5 pounds of a high explosive, you can do
Absolutely.
some serious
Do a lot of
damage. Control room. Let's show photograph number 3 as an example here. Imagine, Charlie, if you have a situation where a drone is flying over this crowd and drops 5 pounds of high explosive. So let me ask you this: how is it possible to protect the public against
I knew
this?
you were going to ask me that somehow, David.
Well, I mean,
You put me on
it's
the
kind of a
spot.
natural question.
Yeah, exactly.
If it keeps you awake at night, I want to.
Well, how do you guard against it?
Yeah.
And I don't know really the answer to that. I know there are technologies out there, for instance, that would enable people to take control of the drone. Some of those drones have homing technology involved with them, where if the signal is jammed, we could send it right back to the person that started it out. But that's something I think that planners are going to need to start thinking about, is how would you address it? What regulations are already in place? Not that any FAA regulations, for instance, would deter something like that, but you have to have a starting point for what's legal and what's not legal, and where can you fly these things and where can you not, and how are you going to discern between what's a legitimate use of this technology versus a bad actor using this technology for evil purposes.
You know, I was just here on Bishop Street, downtown Honolulu, about a week ago, talking with a fellow, and it showed me on his laptop a video shot right here in the historic district of downtown Honolulu, of this shot with a GoPro camera and a little small drone about half the size of this table in front of us, you know, the twin helicopter.
Right.
And it was a beautiful video, but you know, at low levels that a helicopter could not get in, all around the historic buildings and Honolulu Hale and the King Kamehameha statue and the Iolani Palace and the Capitol.
Right.
And you know, I was thinking about this video when I was watching it, and then you know, I know of tests that have been done with radio-controlled model airplanes 15 years ago, where they float across the Atlantic.
Yeah, this is just the extension of that, but it's much more sophisticated now that it's GPS and computer-based.
And so we sit here and we're talking about, you know, security for an international sporting event, and you actually, if you had the drone capability in terms of range, the drone could be operated from Yemen.
Yeah, yeah.
Get up and it goes a couple days in advance, and you know, it arrives maybe low on fuel, but you know, able to deliver a warhead to a sporting event or a large public event from some incredible distance.
There are not many countries out there today with that kind of capability. But again, with the availability of the smaller units and close-in use, you don't have to send them from another country. They can be sent right here.
And so that your security ring around an event, then what does that do? It just
Well, it basically erases it.
Erases the ring, right?
That's right. Yeah. So when you worry about things like that, these are things that really need to be looking at what kind of technologies are available to counteract. And I've been out of the business in terms of the government and the military for a while, and I'm just hoping at this point that there are some classified projects out there that are addressing some of these issues.
Well, I hope so too, and I appreciate you coming down and spending time with us on the show. It's very educational for the public to know about some of the things that keep you awake at night. So some things that need to be talked about and addressed in the future.
Well, the last thing that we want to do is give people ideas, but we also need to raise awareness.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that's what we're all about here at ThinkTech, raising awareness. You've been watching ThinkTech Asia. I'm your host, David Day. Thank you, Charlie Goodwin.
My pleasure.
Great to have you
Always
here again.
enjoy coming down.
And stay with us. We'll be here same time slot, same time next week. Please have a safe drive home. Good night.